Okay, recommencing with our modeling process. I did get a question over the break. Wolf Knightley said, I find the hardest part for me so far is the topology. I mean, you can look at it and it looks straight in one perspective and completely messed up in another. So which one do you take to heart, or am I overthinking it? Well, it's one of those things that you will have a hard time with until you start to get a really solid sense of three-dimensional space and form in your head. A lot of people I see who are just getting into character modeling will end up with characters that have very flat sides to their heads. Their models will they'll look round in the front view and they'll look round in the side view, but then you start looking at three-quarter views and you start seeing all these like strange creases running right up over the temple and things like that, because nobody is taking the time to really wrap their camera around the head and see how things are really starting to form. Now, Flash just brought up a really good point. He said the ADP is a must-watch for a lot of topics. I think it'd be a great idea once you guys have got a solid understanding of just the Blender tools. I mean, I think you're actually ready to tackle this right now. Since you're member sponsors, to jump over into the Maya Advanced Digital Production class, or that list of videos, and just go over the modeling process for the Goblin. All of the tools that I'm going to use over there are easily done now in Blender, and you've got access to all of them. And in that, I do a lot of discussion over this type of thing, like topology and whatnot. And also take a look at the Knight character. He has a very human face, and we do a lot of tweaking to make him look cartoony, but still, flowingly natural in terms of his overall shape, so things don't look oddly proportioned or really jarringly incorrect. Because that's one of the things about exaggeration when you're doing something that is quote-unquote, I'm actually using finger quotes here, you just can't see them, something that looks cartoony. A lot of, especially budding artists, they'll have that work in progress, they'll put it up in the forums, they'll say, I'm sorry, I don't want to sound harsh, but it'll look terrible. It will have, really weird proportions or something to be really, really skewed, and it just doesn't look right. And everyone agrees that it just doesn't look right. And a lot of budding artists will hide behind the statement, well, I want it to look cartoony. And there's a difference between proper exaggeration of a feature and something that actually is just incorrect and looks wrong. So a lot of that, though, is just going to come with time and experience. So at the end of the day, to kind of answer your question, Wolf, I don't think you're overthinking it. It's perfectly common for something you're modeling, especially something like a human head, which you're so used to seeing in the real world, to look really wrong from certain angles. And I think over time you're going to start seeing that for the cause. You're like, okay, well, I just didn't really pay attention to a three-quarter perspective view while I was modeling, or I wasn't looking from this direction. Because, I mean, every time you rotate around a human head, it has a differently shaped profile. The side looks one way, but the side when viewed from above looks a different way. The three-quarter view from here looks a different way. The three-quarter view from underneath looks a different way. You're going to look at a lot of faces. You're going to model a lot of faces, and it will all become much, much, much easier. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue from this point. I'm going to jump over to the front view. Now, we've got a little bit of detail in place for the eyes, certainly not much, but it's enough to get us started. Let's go ahead and transition over to the nose. I'm going to grab the eye once again, and let's just hit H and hide that. Let's jump back to our original geometry, and we'll go into edit mode. Let's switch over to edges, and I want to grab this edge, and probably the next one down underneath it. Now, you may have a slightly different arrangement of edges than I do. Of course, that's natural. It's to be expected. Maybe even the next one after that. So I have three edges here. I'm going to extrude these and just slam them together right in the middle of the screen. So I'm just using that clipping to my advantage to merge these together. As soon as I've done that, I'm going to switch over to the side view and drag these forward, just so I can see them a little bit better. Then switch over to vertices and just place these vertices up here on top of the nose. Now I'm giving them all a little bit of an upward slant as we kind of blend into the shape of the nose. And you'll notice that the smooth, it already looks like the bridge of a nose. That's the cool thing. But it's still way short of the drawing. Do not I repeat, do not try to get the smooth to line up with the drawing at this stage. Instead, go ahead and add a new edge right in here. So let me turn off smooth so it's a little easier to see. Just hit Control R right here. And then we'll jump over to the side view, and if you want to turn smooth back on for this, you can. You've already noticed at this point that the smooth is starting to line up much more cleanly. But we can pull this forward, switch over, and just do individual vertices now. And really what you're doing in your head, and it's easier for some people than it is for others, and I haven't found a solid pattern for it. I think it's just really a concept of, can you imagine 3D space pretty well? But you want to be able to feel, if you were to draw a line down the forehead that kind of went down the side of the nose, and really that's the flow that this next edge should be taking. Something kind of like that. Now we got a huge gap in edges here. I'm going to try not actually to add another one. Instead, I'm going to take what I've got here and sort of try to blend it over, just in an effort to keep the geometry nice and simple. Now, I'm doing some work here kind of in perspective because I want this to be a nice outward flow toward the nose. So I am having to rotate to a nice convenient angle to make that happen. Now, I would like these vertices at the bridge of the nose to be a little more cleanly distributed. So I can take all of these vertices at this point and really just change their entire angle to get a little bit higher. I would do that over running another unnecessary edge down through here. But this just gives much more even spacing as we move out across the bridge of the nose. Now I'm thinking that the bridge of the nose is a little bit thin right here, but it's so early in the process that I would feel bad making a lot of sweeping modeling changes until I get to a point where I've got, a forehead, where I've got a little bit more of the nose in place. So I would advise you not to stress right now exactly what this looks like. I also, just in terms of shaping out a nose later on, I may end up adding another edge through here. So just the fact that I didn't do it just yet doesn't mean that I'm never going to do it. I just kind of want to mention that. We'll just see as I begin to sort of bring the nose out. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and do that, at least a little bit, and then I'll give a quick ready check. So Control-Tab-E, grab here. I'll jump into the side view first. I think it'll just make a little more sense to follow in the side view at the moment. And we'll hit E. Pull this down kind of halfway down the nose, like so. Switch over to Vertices and sort of trace this out. Now in the front view, you're already going to see that you need to let this start to get wider. So just start widening out your detail to let that happen. Now an interesting thing about noses, they are at their widest point when viewed from the side view, right down the center of the nostril. This is not the widest point back here. It's actually going to be right here. So that's where we're going to kind of flow, at least at first. So let's switch back over to edges, and we'll hit extrude one more time. And I'm going to put this right at the top of the nostril, and then right at the top of kind of the tip of the nose. We'll double check the side view, and this can flare out about like so. And we'll turn off smooth a little bit and just look at the geometry. It's coming along pretty nicely so far. And let's do a quick ready check so that people can kind of catch up to this point. Okay, so now we get over into a little bit more of the forming of the nose. I feel like I probably will need some more geometry here. I'm just loath to create it. I don't want to make geometry until I absolutely know without a doubt that I must have it or something will explode. So I'm going to try to avoid it and put it off for as long as I possibly can. Let's begin here in the side view. I'm going to grab edges here and here, and I'm going to extrude this down. So it's going to form about halfway across the nose. Also, I'm going to grab this edge here and extrude it back. And if we take a look in the side view, where I'm really targeting here is just kind of forming right, well, that's the wrong edge. Give me this guy, thank you. Basically outlining where the nostrils are going to connect to the cheek. So something kind of like so, and I can sort of smooth things out a little with the geometry. I'll probably end up having to add some more detail flying up and through there, but we'll get there, one step at a time. Now, well, let me take a look at that in the side view, or sorry, front view. This edge should pretty much be the widest point. As we all know, when your nose connects to your face, there's a little bit of indentation, so we can actually pull this in and pull this out and have a little bit of a trade-off there and start to get a more natural shape. Let's switch back over to edges. I'll grab these two edges and we'll just extrude these down. Jump over to vertices, grab, Alt-M, and merge to center. And if I really want this to turn into an easy-to-read nose, I really will need some more geometry. It's just, there's so little here that there's no real way to get a nice separation between what is nostril and what is tip of nose. So there's a couple of different ways I could go about solving this problem. The way I think I'm going to choose would be to jump over to edges, grab this edge loop, and just hit W and drop in a bevel. We can go ahead and pull the percentage back a bit. Now, I have, on more than one occasion, created a nostril splitter, because this is just kind of a crease for a nostril, as you can see, that wraps around the nose. There is nothing wrong with doing that. We could have, you'll see like how I've got this edge here. I have made that kind of coil around the outside of the nose. I'm probably not going to be doing that in this case. And if I do, it'll be because I changed my mind, and that's totally my prerogative, you know, since I'm the modeler and everything. But what I want to do is use these new vertices to kind of create a little more rounding and a little bit of separation between nostril and nose shape. And you can see that's already forming, which is pretty nice. Now if I turn off smooth, we do need to have some geometry kind of join in here. We don't, of course, these can't stay separated forever. There are, like with everything else, there's a lot of ways to kind of make this happen. It's one of those areas where, despite the probably audible gasp that some people will give, you can probably get away with a triangle in here, because while there is a little bit of motion here, there's not a great deal of motion. Usually the skin just kind of bunches up right in here when you like if you snarl, like you can almost, I guess you might be able to hear me doing it. You kind of lift your front lip up to show your teeth. That skin will bunch up, and if you get a little bit of dimpling because of a triangle, usually it'll help you a little bit. I am at the same time going to try to avoid creating one, and we can avoid it really easily. Just hit Control R, drop in an edge here, and then grab these two vertices and just merge them to center. Now that has created a pole where we are going to have 5 edges come together. That is really common when you have two shapes which are doing two different jobs, basically joining together. Now in a lot of cases, I will often have a triangle up here. So, kind of take these two vertices and merge them together. Again, it's one more thing I'm going to try to avoid, but I just wanted to point out that that is something you'll commonly see in my models. Okay, so now let's see what happens if I go back to edges, just grab these two and just hit F. So that's starting to make the transition over into nostril and cheek. And we have this one vertex here that we can kind of push and pull a little bit to smooth that out. This looks a little weird, but you can't really read that until we get things a little bit more attached. So let's go ahead and focus on that for just a moment. Let's switch over to edges, grab here, and just hit F, and see how bad that is looking. We probably want these shapes that I'm creating here to be much smaller and much tighter to the nose. So I mean, this is probably closer to what we want if we want the shape not to look really weird as it makes this transition. So you can see here we get like this strange sort of webbing that reaches out to the cheek. But you've got to remember that the way we're modeling this right now, we're again doing this kind of minimalist detail thing, which gives you very, very few vertices to solve these kind of problems. And you should fully expect to have to add in edges as we move forward. And as you do that, you'll be able to tighten things up and clean up your various shapes. Okay, now while this doesn't look wonderful by any means, I think it's a really good start. So let's kind of keep on trucking with the nose for just a moment. But I guess before we do that, no, so I don't see where you have did you say 5 poles? It's called a pole, P-O-L-E, and that's going to be where 5 faces come together instead of just 4. There's some different types of poles you can create. There's this one is called, I don't remember the name of it. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's all dependent on how many faces are coming together in any one location. 3 make an interesting shape. Of course, 5 make an interesting shape. And generally, I don't think you ever want to have more than 5 faces coming together in a single area if you can possibly avoid it. All right, so now that we've got that pretty well started, let me go ahead and continue. Jump over here to the front view. Actually, let me do the side view real quick. So I'll pull this up. Let's switch over to edges and extrude just, I could say just those 2, and maybe that will work. Well, I'll just start with these, and if I need to extrude the other 2, I'll just extrude the other 2 separately. I mean, in the end, it doesn't really matter. Now, I am going to pull these vertices together and start forming the outline of the nostril. So, like here, we could go ahead and start to kind of straighten these out when viewed from underneath. Grab these 2 edges again. Back over in the side view, we can extrude and take this all the way back to where we're going to meet with the lip. And that looks pretty good. Now, the great thing is that creating the nostril from this point is actually pretty easy. Let's take a look here, though. We need to probably narrow a lot of this out. So we'll pull this stuff all close together, about like so. Keep the topology nice and clean throughout. And there's a few different ways to attack what I'm about to do here. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as I can. Let's grab edges. Well, no, let me do it a completely different way. Let me hit Control R, and I'm going to split this right here. And just to make sure it doesn't stay straight, we'll just pull it down a little ways, a bit like so. Also, let me grab these edges here, and I'll extrude these down. Jump over to vertices. I can merge these 2 in, so I'll go to last there. And then over here in the front view, we just kind of start to wrap these around. Pull these out a little bit. Then let's grab all of these. There's a couple of different ways I could handle this. A common way that I've used many times in the past is just to branch these over. Go ahead and fill this in as a temporary triangle, knowing full well you're not going to be keeping it. It's almost just like the temporary face that we made in the middle of the eyes, in the middle of the face. Or sorry, middle of the lips, excuse me. Grab faces, grab these 2 guys here, and just do an extrusion. We can scale this in uniformly to make a little bit of an inset, and then scale up, and you've basically just made your nostril. As soon as you've got that, hit X and delete out those faces. You don't need them anyway. They can just be open holes. It's not going to hurt anything. But now you've got all of the detail, you've got all of the geometry you need to form some nicely rounded nostrils. You just need to go in and start wiggling some vertices around. And you can take a look in smooth, and I mean they're looking pretty nostril-like already. We can take these and pull them in a little closer. And then, of course, you can remember to wrap the camera around inside. It'll often help. You can pull these really far up inside. I mean, a lot of how you handle this part depends on where you imagine the camera's going to be. And if you ever think you're going to get close to looking up the nose, then you may want to cap this off. Or if you're loading the character up in some sort of software that doesn't like having holes of any kind, then you can, of course, cap that off. But now you've really got all the geometry that you would need to get a lot of different nose shapes. I mean, if you want like the little flat type of front nose, or get, grab these two and get like that little, that ski slope shape, so you can give your character a lot of different nose jobs at this point. What I'm going to do is jump over to the side view and just kind of start shaping from here. And if I pull these vertices a little close together as we get to the top of the nostril, then it becomes easier for me to get a nice division for the nostril kind of flaring out from the shape of the nose. So if I turn off smooth, you can see that a little better. Just kind of pull these a little closer, so you can see there, and then let it separate as we get kind of up here across the bridge of the nose. Thin this out a little bit. Okay, we'll pull that in, make that nice and snug, flip back over to smooth, and that's actually coming along reasonably well.
Just occurred to me you could actually run the end of, if you were going to be sticking the camera up in that direction, you could run the end of the inside of the nostrils into the center line as well.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, and just kind of make a hose that connects in the middle. Yeah, that totally works. In a lot of cases, what I'll do is I'll just cap them off and let the material go to black right there when I handle my textures. And then once we start handling the cheek, we're probably going to have to do a little bit of push and pull between this row of vertices and this row of vertices to make sure that we have some indentation there at the back of the nostril. We may end up also having to run an extra edge around the nose to sort of help make that happen, or not. It's one of those kind of trade-offs where sometimes you have to do that and sometimes you really don't. So I think this is a really good start on some nasal geometry. We can jump over to our front view and just verify a few things. Like, it looks like our nose could probably be a little wider, so we probably want to widen it at this point. The great thing about adding detail at this point is, as long as you can find a nice way to terminate it, you can run stuff from the eye into the nose, so you're not really adding loops that go very far across your geometry. For instance, if I want to make the nostril look a little better, and I'm not saying I'm going to keep this, but I will go ahead and do it, mostly just for the sake of demonstration, I can take this row of vertices and I can pull them forward like so, and just use this as the beginning of some rounding that's not even in place yet. And then maybe spread these out a little. So I'm making some room, as you can see. Hit Control R, and now I have an edge that just goes right up the nose. So it didn't really go very far. It didn't add a whole lot of excess geometry that wrapped all the way around the head, or that I have to worry about too much. I just need to take a little bit of time and spread things out nice and evenly. Make sure I'm using the geometry intelligently to get nice rounding here and there. We can make curvature for the top of the nostril in this fashion, which we didn't really have before, and it's kind of a nice effect. Switch over to edges, maybe pull this out, always kind of every so often take a peek at your smooth version, see what that's looking like. See, we can pull this out now and get some really nice shaping to the nostril, and then pull these in. We're starting to get some nice creasing at the outside, which is also pretty cool. All right, and just for the fun of it, let's jump out to object mode and just click smooth. And it just gives you a kind of a nice indication of how this is looking. So it really does kind of have a weird floating pair of lips over really weird mask kind of thing, but that's kind of what you're going for at this stage. So let me do another ready check for people to kind of catch up to this point or ask questions. I did get a question that popped up in BuzzNet asking where I added that extra edge in. I moved some geometry around. I didn't have to recut anything. I just moved some stuff so that I created an opening that went from the inside of the eyelid down around the side of the nostril and up the nose, which is a really convenient way to add detail when you need it without that detail going, all over the head or having to, eventually become another edge you have to tie into the neck, that sort of thing. And it added some nice rounding to the nostril where I can get the nostril to sort of tuck in and have nice creasing where it meets the cheek. Because there's fewer ways to really ruin a good nose than to just have it smoothly flow into a cheek. It just looks weird. Like it's some kind of a pig nose effect.
Melted face.
Melted face, exactly.
I've been known to run a spiral that ends up inside the nostril to get the creasing round.
Yep, I've done that many times myself. Have it come up over the lip and then kind of wrap around here and go straight up the nose.
Yeah.
It's possible. I'm trying to remember, and it's just been so long. I think either the Goblin or the Knight character did that in ADP. I can't remember which one.
That's probably where I picked it up then.
Yeah, well, you can actually start that way. You can just start with a single edge loop, just like kind of how we form the eye and the mouth, and you can just create a little edge loop that wraps around and coils around the nose, and then have it meet right here. So like it's going to meet right in the center and then wrap around and go up the nose, and then you can model the rest of the nose from that point. It's actually kind of a neat trick. But unless you really know what you're doing and you know what the geometry is supposed to look like in advance, it's just going to give you a headache. Let's see. There's something I kind of want to do here it's weird, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to push some of this geometry a bit farther up the nose and spread this out and let this become the underside of the nose. So basically I'm kind of making the nostril a little more extended in a way. It will probably require me to do a little bit of reshaping to keep things from looking weird. But the reason is that I want to start getting some geometry in place to connect the nose to the mouth. And I have this one edge here that I don't really need another edge here at the center of the lips. I don't need another vertical edge at this point. But I do need these to be connected. So if I scoot some stuff around, then it's a lot easier for me to justify just going from here straight to here and just hitting F. And that's just a really nice way to get started in merging all this stuff together. Now let me turn off smoothing for just a minute. And that's a pretty neat way to go about that. There's another kind of a trick you can use. I'll show you just to... let me do a couple things first. Let me grab this edge here. And let's extrude that out very slightly, so just a little bit. Jump over to Vertices and grab here, and of course just merge. First or last doesn't really matter to me. And And we can also just grab edge here and hit F and just merge those together. Now, of course, this is ridiculously simple geometry. You won't want to leave it this way for a lot of reasons. But one of the first things you'll probably want to create is a nice little indentation. You get like that dual creasing right here at the front of underneath the nose. I forget what all that stuff's called right now. There's a few different ways to go about creating that. One way, I'll show you a couple of different ways, and you can really take your pick. It doesn't matter to me which one you use. We can just grab vertices, and let me turn off smoothing for just a moment. We can bring this together a little bit. It's going to start forming a little more to the shape of the actual shape of the lips as we move forward. We don't have to worry about that right now. And if I add another edge of geometry in here, I can grab this inner vertex and just slide that back and pull this kind of out and back a little, so a little less curvature, but the curvature's there. And you can see that starts to give you a nice subtle indentation. If I go out to object mode and maybe just for the fun of it, kick my view up one more level, that doesn't look too bad. If you want something more pronounced, there's another trick you can use. Like I'll probably just leave this edge here. I'm going to need it sooner or later anyway. But another trick you can use that I've done plenty of times in the past is very similar to like what we did at the end of the toe. We could, let's do it like this. I'll just cut the whole thing. So I'll get the knife tool and we'll just slice right down the front of the lip. I know I said a moment ago we don't really need this, and we don't, but we can use it. Nobody said we couldn't have it. And then cut this up here to this corner. Everything stays quadrangulated. If Blender will play nice, then everything stays quadrangulated. There we go. And we can just get out of here, grab this guy, and just pull it up. And we get this nice edge that terminates right inside the mouth and gives us a nice basis from which to create that indentation. Now, I've used this trick a lot on lips for characters, and this is kind of a flow that I use when I really want that area at the front of the lips to have a much more pronounced creasing, because you can see how that creasing really is showing up now. And maybe pull this out so the cleavage kind of stops when you get to the lips. And kind of like so. Spread this out a little more. So it's just one of those, which do you prefer? Now, I'm going to back up. I just wanted to kind of show that method, kind of give you sort of here's something to think about, but and I'm going to remove as much of it as I can in one go. Let's grab all of these edges, and I'll just hit X, dissolve, check dissolve verts, and that goes right back to there, which is great. I'm just going to leave this very simple, because there's another thing to keep in mind as well, is that you do have the power of texturing at your command. If you need areas like this creasing to seem a little more pronounced, you can actually make that using bump mapping or normal mapping. As long as you have a really close approximation of it here in your geometry, texture can get you the rest of the way very easily. So don't be afraid of that. Okay, so I'm going to kind of straighten up this detail a little bit more. Flare out just a little. And if we're going to take this kind of a piece at a time, let's go ahead and just hit Control E, grab edges, and I'll extrude this out all the way to the corner of the mouth. Jump back to vertices, grab, merge. Oh, thank you. Alt-M, thank you, and merge that to last. Now, obviously we've got a lot of things here that kind of need to come together fairly smoothly. And before I start joining things, what I'll often do, because I've only got two really new vertices here, I mean if you don't count these guys, so these two vertices need to be confirmed. So take a look at where they rest in the front view. And I'm going to pull this in a little bit. I like to have this sort of shape that goes out from the nose and wraps around the corners of the mouth, kind of like where puppet lines are. I'm going to let that be there at least a little bit. So maybe do something kind of like that. So maybe like the fold in the triangle will help that. So we'll start there, but then we need to jump over to the side view and confirm their location here as well. So you do some jumping back and forth. Like you can see, there's this little bit of a crease suggested here, and my vertex is sitting right on the edge of that crease, but the crease appears to be all the way back here, so we would want to slide that back. Similarly here, we're just beyond the crease, but it looks like that may need to kind of sit forward and start to sit on where we're thinking the cheek should show up. So use that as a way to kind of confirm where everything should be. It looks like we need to be a little more careful about how we shape the back of the nose. A lot of this stuff kind of feels like it needs to come back to really rest on the surface of the cheek. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Now, from here, my next move would just be to grab these two edges and just bring them together. And then keep it easy on yourself. You know that you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 edges that are going to have to meet inside this location. Well, that's fine. Just hit Control R, roll up 3 times, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 edges. Perfect. So before we get too much further, though, I would jump over to Vertices and kind of start rounding things out. You know, this is going to come all the way to the corner of the mouth. If we just kind of realize that, it may be a better idea to move that out. Now that I see the connection, it occurs to me it may be better to kind of treat it all the way out to the corner instead of going halfway up, because you'll notice I've got a huge gap in my geometry here. I can easily run an edge right down here from the eyelid again to the mouth. It doesn't go all the way down the neck. It makes things a lot easier for us to manage, and I'm all about that. I really like that. Now, moving on from here, I may end up actually removing one of these edges now that I'm taking a closer look at the geometry, but because there's a couple of different ways I could attack this. No, let's do it that way. Watch real closely. I'm going to pull these back. So that whole adding of 3 edges there, that might have been a teensy little bit premature. And, you know, I know, Zach, premature, madness. Well, it happens. Go ahead. Let's go grab edge. Let's extrude this out, like so. Switch out to vertices, grab here and here. And Alt-M, merge to last, and start to kind of curve this around. Of course I don't want to merge all the way down through there, but I could start to do something like that, but I don't really like that solution. It's not speaking to me the way I kind of want it to. So let's see, if I pull these back in, what I'm doing now is I'm kind of I'm roughing out how these are going to meet and seeing which arrangement I like the best. Because, I mean, I can do this and just get rid of one excess edge. You'll notice that closes everything up fairly neatly, with the understanding that I'll probably have to add more detail in this direction and more detail in this direction to make everything round out. So, let me see. There's all kinds of different ways you can combine geometry. So it's always going to be that question of which way is the best way for what I'm doing. Here's the deal. Because I've got this edge coming out so far here, it may be a good idea. Well, it would actually kind of require me sort of backtracking a little bit with the detail that I've added here. I can't just merge. I can't just do a zipper merge all the way down through this point, meaning close these two, close these two, close these two, and so on. I could split. Sorry, I'm thinking. This happens from time to time. I know, it's horrible. this feels like it could work. Let me try this, and then if I don't like it, I'll just change it later. So I'm going to go switch over to edges, just grab edge, and just hit X, dissolve vertices. Switch over to vertices and grab U and U, Alt M, merge, Shift R, and that closes those up. Now we need to really kind of shape out everything. Of course, take a look at your smooth, see how much you've sort of killed stuff, and this doesn't look too bad right now.
That's looking pretty nice.
Yeah. Now we need some more detail to kind of follow the curvature of the cheek, but I'm going to move away from that for just a minute and go back to the lips. Now I did see a question. When I had to change geometry in a nearly finished spherical or curved shape, I find it hard to get it smooth and flow naturally as building it up like we do now, even with smooth. Now, when I had to change geometry in a nearly finished spherical or curved shape, I find it hard to get it smooth and flow naturally. Okay, yeah, well, building it up is always going to be the easier way to go. Now, if you already start out with a whole bunch of vertices and you don't have that ability to, I mean, in some cases, I've had models I need to reshape, and what I'll do is, well, in terms of Blender operations, I'll dissolve, and I'll get rid of detail, shape a lower amount of detail, and then start adding back in, and that will help in a lot of cases. In cases where I simply can't do that for any number of reasons, I will fall back on sculpting or using things like proportional editing to get nice, smooth transitions. So you got a lot of options, and it's really just going to be which one is right for what you're doing in your current project. Okay, let's move away from the cheek for just a minute, but first let's give a quick ready check for people to catch up to this point. You? Okay, I'm going to move away from the cheek for just a moment, and we're going to continue with the mouth, starting with the lower shape here, because we've got it connected into the face here, but this could be extended a bit further. So let's switch over to edges, and I'm going to grab all three of these edges that kind of make the lower side of the cheek, and we'll just extrude these. And notice I'm just kind of spreading them out a little bit manually, like so. Let's immediately jump over to the side view, go to X-ray, and we need to pay a little closer attention to where these go. These probably need to be tucked in underneath to give us some depth for the lip. So we're just going to flare them out, kind of like that. And we can grab the vertices again, jump over once more, again with an extrusion, and we're going to do some serious double checking of locations because we want these to feel like they're tucking up underneath the lip here, and then they're tucking up underneath the lip here. So something about like so, because it is going to get flatter as we move away, but we need to create that little bit of creasing there. Now these here in the side view, I'm just going to kind of set right up above where the chin comes in and then start to spread them back across the cheek. We need to verify that in the front view. So here this needs to be widened out a bit and kind of widened out here as well. Now a good idea is to just occasionally jump out and take a look, because we're starting to create a really wide looking chin, and it looked kind of okay in my perspective view or my orthographic views. So now you're just going to really just be doing some back and forth adjustment. Take a look at what looks right in one view versus another. And at the end of the day, you want this to look right in 3D. If it looks weird in like an orthographic view, generally I find that to be much more preferable to having it look weird in perspective. Okay, now we've got this leading over across here. If we start to kind of spread this out a little bit, then if I turn off smoothing, you can see the geometry a little better. We can start spreading out the corner of the mouth just a tad. And then switch over to edges, and just grab edge, edge, and just hit F. And that's now meeting up pretty well. Here, it would probably be a good idea to consider branching out in a new direction. So instead of just grabbing these two and merging, because our polygons start to look a little strange, I would probably instead grab all of these edges here and extrude those out. grab vertex here, and go ahead and merge to last here, and merge to last as well. And then we can start kind of spreading out this detail, and we can create our concentric edge loops from that point. And let's just double check perspective. We don't have a lot of detail to work from in terms of a drawing, which that's fine. That happens. It's actually fairly common. So let's kind of go ahead, Kevin.
I was wondering whether a central split that right between the lips that would.
Oh, you mean like here?
Possibly. Yeah.
Oh, very likely. In fact, I'll go so far as to say, yeah, probably. I mean, definitely. I'm just not adding it yet until we get a little further back along the side of the head.
That's cool.
Again, it's back to kind of getting into this with a mentality, mostly because everybody's kind of starting out. If I was modeling this completely on my own, it's very possible I might have a lot more geometry in here. But I have more than once found that it's difficult for people to follow along if you have a whole lot of vertices, because they're busy trying to manipulate all those verts themselves, and I'm kind of fast at it. And if you're not, if you don't have a lot of modeling practice, it's just a pain in the rear to try to keep up with me. So I'm trying to do this with as few vertices as I can, just for starters. So we've got a really nice kind of central face. We can get away from this, actually. Get completely away from this. If we jump over to the side view, we could actually begin on an ear. Now, this will be a pretty stylized ear in terms of three-dimensional geometry. Like much else of the character, it's also very stylized, and ears are one of those things where you can just create tons and tons and tons and tons of geometry. So what I'm going to do to get an ear started is just make a spiral of faces. So let's put our 3D cursor right here at the beginning of the ear. Jump over to the front view, and we'll put this kind of here at the front of the ear as well, up against the side of the head. So it's, you know, in what I imagine is about the same location. So that's going to end up being probably as close as I can hope for. Let's add a plane. So just Shift A, plane. It's going to be crossing over the center line, so make sure you kill off clipping temporarily so that you can scale this down. Go ahead and turn clipping back on. It'll just save us some time later. I'm going to rotate this in the y-axis to kind of point more or less up and down. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then jump back over to the side view. Turn off smoothing because it's just annoying and in my way, and then take these 4 vertices, and I'm just going to start right around the cartilage of the ear. That's it. That's all I'm doing right there. Pretty basic, pretty straightforward. If you go to the front of the head, you can now take these 2 vertices at the back and just kind of start to pull them out a little bit. Or I think I just grabbed the 2 completely incorrect, wrong vertices. I think that was horrible what I just did. Yeah, I need these 2 vertices, so you can just verify they're the ones at the back, like so. And we'll pull those out. And I'll probably pull these maybe out just a little bit as well. So, kind of guesstimating. Let's jump back over to the side view. Jump to edges, and I mean, you can just do this if you guys remember this little maneuver. Isn't that cool what I just did there?
It does work really well for ears.
Yeah, I never use extrusions.
Yeah,
I never use extrusions like that, like pretty much hardly ever. But I'm control right clicking. If you're still using Blender's oh so intuitive paradigm of left clicking just as well, right clicking do all of your real work, then you'll flip your mouse buttons. But I'm just control right clicking a few times. I don't even have a set number of times. So in this case, I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clicks, and just immediately switch over to vertices and just trace out that cartilage again. It's just a neat trick.
You know that mad dragonfly wing I was doing.
Yeah.
I did using that control right click.
Yeah, it's just nifty is what it is. It's just really, really nifty. Now, if I grab these 4 vertices here, come over to the front view, of course we can pull those over, do some adjustments to make sure this is all sitting kind of on the outside of the cartilage of the ear. And we kind of automatically end up with a nice start for an ear. Now, we want this to connect. We basically want to make a hoop out of all of this. So let's go back over to the side view. And let's see, I'll pull this up. We'll iron that out. And I'm just doing some really, really generic reshaping. Let's grab edges here, and I'll do another extrusion like so. Waggle the vertices around a little bit, and then just connect. Boom. There you have it. Now, the good news about modeling an ear is that the ear doesn't really flex very much. I mean, they move around on the head sometimes if you want to get really, really technical, but they don't generally bend a whole lot unless you know you're going to be animating that. Somebody's going to, maybe their ears do waggle like a special character. Somebody's going to have their ear grabbed and waggled. Hopefully that'll all be specced out before you begin your modeling process. But either way, I'm going to keep things pretty simple. Now, I have seen a lot of ear models where the design of the model is such that you basically make a spiral of edges that go all the way in. And that can be very, very useful. We are not going to do that. But, again, I've seen it, and you can make some nice ears that way. What we're going to do instead is grab this ring of edges here. So grab that. And just hit F, and that's going to turn that into an N-gon. Now this is where things start to get a little bit fun, and I start to get a little crazy on you. We've got a flat area, more or less, right in here. That's kind of, it's going to blend into the side of the head, but then we've got a ridge that sticks out across the back of the ear. To create this, I'm going to grab the knife tool, start here at this corner, and I'm just going to mimic the curvature all the way back around, and then anchor it back in there. So you can see how that worked. Now, how did I know how many times to click? I clicked once for each one of these outside vertices, so that now I can just connect them. Click, click. Or, I mean, another way to go about that is to switch over to vertices, just grab vert and hit F, and Blender will fill that in for you, which is also pretty fancy. Now, with just that done, you actually got some really neat modeling power from that. Let me frame up on this vertex. We can take these vertices and we can pull them in a ways, and we can stretch these out like so, and pull them in, create that differentiation between our shapes. Now, you can kind of decide for yourself how much crease difference you want to make here. You can, for instance, really pull this up inside so that the smooth gets really kind of sharply creased. By the way, your smooth should look really terrible at this point. I forget that sometimes, but that's just the way the N-gon is going to be calculated. This is just another reason why you generally don't want N-gons on a model, at least on a finished one. As a general reminder, or a gentle reminder, I like to think of N-gons as a tool, as something you can use to get the job done, but certainly not the be-all, end-all of your modeling process. Okay, so now if we pull this up, I can go back over to the side view, and we can create another cut. Watch this. So click, 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 and click. I just made a spiral. Ooh, and Blender was just like...
No, you didn't.
Yeah, Blender was just like, oh, that was horrible. Why would you do that to me? Well, I tried to. So I'll just make it a piece at a time, and hopefully Blender will let me do this. Actually, Blender should have no problem with me doing this.
You've lulled it into a false sense of security.
Yeah, well, it happens. Ah! Hit spacebar just a little too quickly. Then click over to here. We could also split that out. In fact, I'll do that for now. And I won't give myself too much of a hard time over that. I mean, it does give one more edge we're going to have to blend into the face, but that's okay. And so now we can... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, actually, that does bring up a good point. Ears, in particular, are one thing where you really do want to be careful that you don't get a lot of geometry in, because
Well, you get
the side of the head, you're not going to want that amount of geometry. I think my first go, I made a head and then I made the ear, and then I came to attach it and realised I had like 37 edges around the edge of the ear.
Yeah.
Like 7 around the hole.
Right, and that will just... It'll make you cry when you realize you've got to somehow make all of that work.
Yeah, it's not good.
Okay, so now I'm just going to switch over to faces. We'll grab this one face in the middle. Also, notice Blender's doing something really weird with a floating face right here. I always get kind of scared when I see that. So I'm going to grab this and just nuke this face. And there it is. You just got to click right on the handle, and it's a secondary face that just remained behind when I was attaching stuff. Let me just see what happens if I nuke that. Alright, so we lose this, as you can see, but the edges are still in place, so that's just Blender being a little funny. Don't stress that, I've seen this before. I think it's one of those things where the Blender Foundation would be like, so yeah, that whole B-mesh thing, it's in beta, dude, remember. So we'll grab edge, edge, and just hit F. And edge, edge, and just hit F, and just close up the shape this way.
I think it's a normal problem from when you did the edge, when you did the hitting F in edge mode. I think it got the normals wrong then.
It could be. But still, it just seems like something that shouldn't be happening to me. For right or for wrong, I don't think that should be the case. Let me get back out to here. I'll grab this edge loop, and now we can do some kind of fun shaping for the ear. We can just hit extrude, and then scale that down, and pull that in a ways, and then extrude again, and scale down, and pull down. The whole thing should have kind of a downward sweep to it. I mean, even that is enough to kind of get us started for the time being. Now for the earlobe, I'm going to grab all of these outer edges. So not this, that should generally be, well, maybe not even that. It depends on whether we want hanging earlobes or attached earlobes, really. And I don't much care. I'm just going to grab these edges here at the back of the ear and extrude those in. And you see that makes a nice little bit of thickness for us. You can also scale them up uniformly a little bit, and all that's doing is just mocking up some rounding for you.
Yeah, you often see ears that are too thin.
Yeah.
Haven't got enough flesh to them.
And we can go back to edges, grab these edges once more, and I'll extrude, right click, and then uniformly scale down and pull in. Like so. And we can do some more scaling down. So it really depends on how much curvature you want at the back of the ear. So maybe just do one more. So E, right click, scale. And then move this into position. Grab some vertices and just kind of do some shaping. Here's your ear thickness. Now, let's see. At this point, we need to start worrying about how we're going to blend this into the side of the head. And it just seems to me like we could maybe use one more edge right here in this area. Now, Blender's not really going to like that because we have this triangle. Which, I mean, it would quad that. It would no longer be a triangle at that point. You can use that to your advantage, I suppose. We could do this, and then, that's totally valid. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So we'll just do that. And then we will grab edge and edge and just hit F. And now our job becomes to wiggle these vertices around to create sort of a smoother blend into the head, which we won't really know whether that's working very well until we go about trying to attach this, just FYI. I've also made this hole a little bit small here on the inside, so I'll open this back up. We can do the same thing back here, and again, this is really, you know, do you want attached earlobes or do you want dangling earlobes? Because really that just controls where you want the blending to take place. The more forward you make it, the more you get kind of the dangling effect. If you start pulling it back a little bit, then you get more of the attached look. So it's really kind of up to you. Let's do this. Let's grab edge and edge, and I'll extrude both of these forward. And get to perspective view, because that way I won't have stuff flying into my face. We'll grab these two verts, Alt-M, and even to center will probably be just fine. Pull these around. And then we can just grab edges here and hit F. And then using this vertex, we've now got what we need to get that kind of starting to blend over. So now, to get this kind of turned more into the side of a head, and we could make a triangle there if we just really, really wanted to. It might save us a little bit of attachment. So if I widen this out a little, or I mean, I could attach straight across there, but I don't really want to go that far with it. So let me grab faces here. Let me turn off smoothing, just make the geometry a little easier to see. We'll grab edges, grab hue, and hit F. So we made like one odd little triangle there. But this gives me this edge loop that we see here. I can hit extrude, right-click, and just scale this out. And now I've got the basis for the geometry that will form the side of the head. It just needs to be tweaked around. I've got to pull vertices in, out, I've got to make this flat, I've got to lay it against the side of the head, but I have a nice circular patch that will serve as like my primary point for shaping out an ear in the first place. I've only got to take some time to sort of finesse it and untangle it, unravel a little bit of it. So it's a down and dirty way to make an ear, but it is a way to make an ear. And let's see what it looks like smoothed. So we could pull this down a little, and you can pull this up a little bit, pull this out. You can add more edge loops in here if you want to create more ridges, because all of this is just a circular extrusion at this point, so you got a lot of room to do that. For a simple character, I would let that be more texture than anything else, just not really stress it. We're just going to flatten this out as nicely as we can. Pull this out to make some room so this can be flattened a bit further. And without there being a head in place to work from, I think this is a really good start for an ear. So at this point, folks, we've got kind of everything that I really wanted to get in place, and then some. We've got some of the major features of the face already in place, most of them actually. No, we've got all of the major features in place. We've got the mouth, we've got the nose, we've got the eyes, and we have an ear. So that is it for today's class. Now in the next class we're going to get all of this attached, we're going to shape this into a head, and time permitting we'll make kind of a helmet shape for some hair. But that will be based on how much time we have to kind of get things done. So I want to thank everybody for attending tonight. Of course your homework is, as usual, going to be to get to this point, and I will catch you all next week. Take care.